Hey, welcome to the Man Up Podcast. I'm Terry Gwaltney. I'm going to be your host today, where my goal is to encourage men to have the right mentality. Not mentality, but mentality, by helping shape the way men think about their roles and their responsibilities. Listen, there's an ancient proverb that says, there is death and life in the power of the tongue. I want to talk to you today about the words your family needs to hear from you, men. As men, we need to understand the power of our words, how important it is to be intentional, to make sure our wives and our kids know that we care, that we believe in them, that we love them unconditionally. Now, why is this so important? Because our words carry weight and influence in the lives of the people that we love the most, like nobody else. Your wife has one husband, your kids have one father, and your role in their life is unique, and it also comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think if we were honest, we can look back over our lives and just begin to think about how powerful the words were that your dad spoke to you or over you. They may have been negative words, like you're never going to amount to anything. You're just not cut out for winning, or whatever other negative word they could give you. Those words become hard to shape or to shake as you go on in life. And in different ages and stages in our life require different things. You may have had the benefit of a father that always believed in you, always told you that he loved you, always told you that he had your back. Obviously, that helped shape your self-confidence going forward. So as we talk about this, there's going to be a lot of reflection I'm going to encourage you to do. Because not giving people around us what we didn't get is not an excuse. I can tell you that it can be more difficult. It's hard to give what you didn't receive yourself because you're trying to figure out what it looks like. But wow, if I dumb that down, you say, well, I didn't get all that. Well, what would it have been that you wanted? What would you have liked that to look like in your own life? And whatever that is, that's what you need to be giving your kids. That's what you need to be giving your spouse. It's going to take more work. We grow up and we're really just kids in bigger bodies and carrying around some of the, the same hang-ups and the same insecurities that we had when we were growing up. And it's on us to make sure that our kids don't have to fight through some of the same things that we did. So everybody's words just don't carry the same amount of weight and influence. They aren't considered as important to others. Would you agree with that? So I want you to think about that for a moment. When the President of the United States says a word or makes a comment on something that's going on around the globe in relation to foreign affairs, it has a ripple effect. They're trying to interpret what he said. What did he really mean by that statement? What's the meaning behind the word? And because he's the president of the most powerful nation on the earth, it has a disproportionate amount of influence in what he says. It carries more weight. You think about people that work in the financial arena of our country. When they make certain comments about where they see the market going, it affects decisions that people are making about their financial future and future buying decisions, because of the role that they have in the marketplace gives them more influence. Now, the guy you work with might be telling you what he thinks the market's going to do. It's going to be a bull market, but it doesn't carry the same weight as somebody that's working on Wall Street. So we need to understand that we do have a unique role that comes with heavy responsibility for those that are closest to us. Coaches can get a group of underdogs convinced that they can win against all odds simply through their words of motivation and believing in them. So we can see the power in this. If the coach believes I can do this, I can begin to almost drink that Kool-Aid where I believe I can do this. And Henry Ford, I believe, is the one that said, if you think you can do this, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. In other words, you are really who you're competing against. It really all comes down to the man in the mirror, and it's no difference in this situation. Words can shatter our kids and our wives emotionally, or our words can help shape them positively and build them up. So I want you to take a moment, reflect on the words you use with your family today. I'm going to give you an example I think it's I think we're on guard more times maybe when we're in our careers and around our colleagues and our peers on what we say because we know they're not going to give us as much grace. They're not going to cut us as much slack if we say something stupid or off the cuff or something just honestly that's just rude and brash. But with our family, there's this familiarity. And I like to give the example. It's like when if you ever went out and bought a new car, even if the car was just new to you and it wasn't brand new, the way you treated that car in the first 3 months was different than what you treated it 3 years later. If it was new and you had kids, it's like nobody's eating in this car. Put that away. We're not having that in here. You're not getting in here. Take your shoes off. All these different things. Why? Because you knew how much that car cost. You were proud of the vehicle that you had. You liked the way it looked. You loved the way it smelled and how it made you feel when you stepped into that car. 3 years later, you're driving that thing like it's a rental car. You're using it to jump speed bumps and laugh about it with your kids. You can't get in your car if you have toddlers in the back probably without finding milk that looks like cottage cheese or French fries like that are so hard they could pierce an armor, that you were wearing. Why? Because you become familiar with it. And the vehicle didn't change. You changed. Your attitude towards it and its value changed. And I think it's so easy for us that when we come home, we let our guards down with the people that we love the most, that we're the closest to, but yet we're the most familiar with. And it's like I would never say that to anybody else, but you find yourself saying something to your wife that just hurts and cuts, or you find saying something to your children who are not in a position to correct you or rebuke you, but they just kind of walk away with their tail tucked. It's like, wow, we need to understand how powerful our words are. There truly is death and life in the power of our tongue. So I was recently sitting around a campfire with a bunch of guys, and this one gentleman was sharing the story of, he'd been disconnected from his dad at a very young age. His dad actually ended up, going to prison. He had struggled with, drugs most of his life. Part of the story, that he had heard about his dad wasn't quite factual, from people close to him and his family. But something radical happened in his dad's lives years later. This man now is an adult and has his own kids. His dad got out of prison, got born again, gave his life to Christ, just turned his life around, and then wanted to reach out to his son. His son really didn't know how, he felt about all that. But in the end, they did, and they began to make amends. And this is the most powerful thing that I heard out of my conversation with him, as he was sharing with tears running down his eyes. This guy was an avid fisherman and sportsman, loved to fish, loved to be outdoors, never had that opportunity, obviously, with his dad, was sharing it with his son now, and it was just a big part of his life. And on about the second or third visit that his dad came in, because he would fly in from out of state, out west, he said, would you mind if I took you fishing? And this young man who's in his 30s now with his own family, tears running down his face, said, I told my dad, he said, I've waited my whole life to have you ask me that. The power of those words coming from his dad, who he had been disconnected with, had far more power than the guys that work with that ask him to go fishing all the time. In this case, they even had more power than the words of probably his own children asking him to go fishing. So I want you to understand how much power your words have. So it will cause you to bite your tongue and apologize quickly when you blow it. It will also cause you to be intentional when you see those moments that you can add value and just breathe life into those people that you love the most, because in a lot of cases, really only you can. Without love and acceptance, encouragement, kids can grow up and they can go down a road of unhealthy extremes. This gentleman was sharing a story about the whole time he was growing up, his parents, who both worked outside of the home, were always consumed with everything that was going on in their life. They were remodeling the home, or they had all of their own hobbies, and they had their careers and all the things they were pursuing in life. They were very intentional about, but they weren't very intentional about being a parent. And he longed to, be able to hear, that he showed up, he mattered, he was valued, they seen him. One year he did exceptionally well on his report card, and his parents commented on the fact, wow, you did a great job at that. It's the first time in his life that he ever remembered that happening. What that did is it set something in motion in him that he shared for the rest of his life. That everywhere he went, he sought to get that kind of affirmation. He needed to succeed because subconsciously, if I win and I succeed, then I am valued and will be acknowledged. Later on, in an adult, it carried over into his career and his work life, and he became a workaholic. And it cost him many things in his life, but the drive to succeed was really not about the money, and it wasn't really about the prestige. It was internally looking, I need someone to say, you're valuable, you matter, you're worth it, you're important. You think about girls that grow up and they end up living a very promiscuous lifestyle. And it seems like there's one man after another man after another man. It's like, what is going on? They're so much better than that. They deserve better than that. What's the drive to get into these multiple and bad relationships? But really, many times, if you talk to them, they're searching for something that they was hoping that their dad was going to give them, that they were valued, that they were important, that they mattered, that they were beautiful. And so they couldn't get it from the person who they needed to get it from. So now they find themselves spending the rest of their life trying to find it from other men who tend to only use them, and their love is situational and conditional and not unconditional like it should be as a father. We want to be careful that we don't send our kids down these roads because we're not speaking life over them. We're not speaking a blessing over them. We're not encouraging them. Guys, we're the only ones that can do some of the things that we're talking about today. And we need to step up to the plate and really begin to pay attention. It's okay if you don't know what to say. You can learn. And I want to give you some pointers today. And I hope you take time to write this down and listen to maybe this over and over again. I'm going to give you a list. Maybe they'll help you get going. Okay? Here's your first one. Here's things that you need to start saying. I love you. For some of you, maybe you heard that your whole life. For some of you, maybe you never heard that from your dad your whole life because maybe he thought it was weak. Maybe he never heard that his whole life, so he didn't see the importance or the value in it. And so it was never repeated. You need to say it over and over again. They need to know, your wife and your kids, that your love is not based on their performance and that their love is not conditional. In other words, when they screw up, you don't remove your love from them. You still love them. You may not love what they did, but it doesn't change how you feel about them as a person. It puts them in a healthy place. And keep in mind, when it comes to our kids, we're teaching them how to be an adult. We're teaching them how to be a parent because they're watching and modeling. It's been said, but by the time they're 15, they're modeling what we do, not what we've told them to do. In other words, they're modeling who we are, not what we said. And so super, super important. Second thing is, I like you. I remember hearing this story for the first time, and this old man who was in his 80s came up talking on this subject about the power of words. And his comment was, my mom used to tell me she loved me, but she didn't like me. Now you think about that. This man is 80 years old. He's thinking about the power of words. His mother's long since passed away. But what he can't forget is, my mom said she loved me, but she also told me she didn't like me. Now, I don't know what parent would say that or do that. That had lived in his life for over 8 decades in his thinking, probably something subconsciously that he had to overcome, probably came into every relationship that he ever had. Your kids, your wife, they need to know you like them. Not that you tolerate them, not that you made a decision to have kids, not that you just made a decision to get married and you're going to keep your commitment. No, that you actually like them. They need to know that you're a safe place. They need to know that they're safe because you're there. Think about that when your kids maybe were younger. They would see shadows. They would be scared maybe of the dark, and you would come in with your stories and on how Daddy's just in the next room. If you need anything, Daddy would be here. Long beyond being toddlers, they need to know that they're safe. And sometimes you being in their presence and you communicating brings that safety. It's the same way with your wife. They need to know that they're good enough. You know, there's a lot of negative voices in the world, and you need to use yours to build confidence in your wife. You need to use yours to build confidence in your kids. They need to hear you say, you know what, you're good enough. They need to hear that when they fail. They need to hear that when they don't feel like they're good enough. Powerful, guys. Disproportionate influence and power of those words when they're coming from you. They need to hear words like, I'm giving you a second chance. Why is that important? Because you're teaching that mistakes are normal and failing is just a part of life. After all, you're not perfect, just like I'm not perfect. So they need to know that, you know, I'm going to give you a second chance. They need to hear you say the words, I'm sorry. They need to hear you apologize to your wife and say, I'm sorry. Why? Because you're teaching them by modeling when they screw up with something they said or they didn't say or they should have done or they didn't do with their mother, your wife, that you're owning that responsibility, that you're big enough to say, I'm sorry, and take the responsibility for that. If you expect them to say they're sorry, they need to hear you. You know, you need to own it. You need to admit your mistakes. They need to hear the words like, it's okay. Sometimes they're going to be faced with a situation, let's be honest, we don't have all the answers as parents. We just don't. We're figuring this parenting thing out just like our kids are trying to figure out how to move from being 5 years old to 7 years old, how to go from 7 to being a teenager, from middle school to high school. They're figuring out just like we are. But you can convey that it's going to be okay. You know, when they mess up, it's okay. Mistakes happen. Coming from you will build and give them the confidence, and really what it does, it gives them hope. I can trust him because of, and they can trust you because of not just who you are, but your relationship with them. So again, your words now bring life, and they breathe hope into them. They need to hear words from you like, I trust you, because it conveys an immense amount of confidence when it's coming from you. And I don't know if you know, but personally, it's hard to be trustworthy if you don't trust people. If you don't feel like people trust you, it's hard for you to trust other people. So you need to be intentional about trying to convey, these words. They need to hear from you, it's okay not to be okay. Why? Because nobody's perfect. Nobody has it together all the time. You know? And when you're down, is that really when you want to be kicked? No. That's really when you want somebody to raise out a hand and pull you back up. Most of the time, we don't need a reminder of what we did wrong. We already know. But we do need somebody to say it's okay. You know, we'll get through this. And the key to that is we. You're not in this by yourself. You're not in this alone. We're going to walk through this together. They need to know that, they need to hear from you that you're doing a great job. Why? Because it says, I noticed. You matter. You're important to me. Man, there's grown men watching this podcast today that would give almost all you had if you could have heard your dad once say, good job. I'm proud of you. Don't make your own kids wait a lifetime to hear that from you. Don't make your wife wait a lifetime to hear that from you. Did you know on the side of every one of our wives lives the little girl that wants to be noticed and that wants to hear how beautiful she is from the person that's the most important in her life? And now you've replaced her dad. You are the most important person. She decided she trusted you and wanted to spend the rest of her life with you. Now you carry the greatest voice of influence and hope and love and affirmation in her life more than anybody. Don't treat that lightly. Understand the amount of responsibility you had. I was recently at a gymnastics competition for both of my granddaughters. And it just happened that both daughters of my son-in-law were going to be competing at the same time. So their mom went really close to one of them alongside the gym to be able to watch. And then her dad went to the other one. And I kind of moved right in the middle. So I wasn't in the line of sight of either of them, but I could see both of them. But what I seen is my 8-year-old granddaughter, when she did her floor exercise, when she was done, a crowd of hundreds of people that were in this gym. I was a few feet away from her dad, but not in direct sight. And I watched her perform. And when she turned around, her eyes avoided everybody else, but they locked right on her dad, who was giving her the thumbs up. Why? Because at that moment, his affirmation, his opinion mattered to her more than anybody else in that entire gym. And there's some things, guys, that only us, as a dad or a husband, can give those that are closest to us. And that was one of those moments. Those moments are lived out every day. Your kids need to hear, I love watching you play. Why? Because what they're doing is more important than what you're doing. They need to hear stuff like, I'm so lucky to be your dad. Your wife needs to hear, I feel so lucky to be your husband. Why? Because when it comes to your wife, it's the pursuit. I think for us as men, it's the conquest. Well, I dated her. I got engaged. I bought her a ring. I stood up in front of everybody and made a covenant and told them how much I loved her. And we've moved on now to the next phase in our life, and we've checked that box. Not that we don't love her, not that we don't care about her, but for our wives, they still need to be pursued. It's not a conquest. I need to know every day you love me. I need to know every day that I'm the most important thing in your life. She needs to know every day that she's beautiful from you, in your eyes. There's times they just need to hear the words from you that, what's on your mind? In other words, you were present enough in the moment to know something's up with your kids or your spouse. What's on your mind? What that's saying is I'm paying attention to you. You're not acting the same. I know you well enough. I know you in an intimate way. I know you closer than most people around you. What's on your mind? And that in itself, that question is conveying so much value and so much importance to them as a person. They need to hear you say, let's just spend some time together. Wow. They know how busy you are. They know how many demands there are in your life with your career. They know physically how tired you are. And the mere fact that you say, let's spend some time together, whether that's your spouse or whether that's your kids. Wow, it carries so much weight, guys. It's okay not to be perfect. They need to hear those words. Why? We live in a society where our social media is really a highlight reel of what we want people to think about our life, not really what our life is about. And so we don't want to show the bad side and the real side and the struggle. We want to show the wins and the highlights and the celebrations. But the problem is it sets people up, especially our kids, for a false reality. That's not the way life is lived. It's not an Instagram reel. Life is really about hard times and good times and celebrating together and pushing our way through stuff. And it's okay not to be perfect. Nobody is. I've got one of my granddaughters recently. She's as big around as a pencil. Probably weighs less than 60 pounds. 8 years old, and she's concerned about being fat. Why is she concerned about being fat? Not because of something her mom said or her dad said or her grandparents said, but because something that she overheard another mother was saying about one of her daughters. Oh, she's kind of starting to get a little tummy on her. She wasn't even saying about my granddaughter. She was saying about her own daughter. Yet my wife was taking her out the other day, and they stopped, and she loves waffle fries from Chick-fil-A. And my wife ordered grilled chicken nuggets instead of regular nuggets. And my granddaughter immediately spoke up and said, well, why are you not getting the regular nuggets? Well, I'm trying to be more careful and watch what because they make you fat. No, I'm not saying that. I need to be more health conscious. But what she noticed is normally she would eat the entire thing of waffle fries, and she wouldn't eat any that day. So influence from the outside had an impact on how she had seen herself. And that's what culture is doing, to our kids and even to our wives. It's creating the false illusion of what really reality is. We need to be the ones that step in there and speak life into these situations. So listen, as we wrap up today, I want us to remember how far-reaching and impactful our words are and can be. I also want us to realize it's never too late to start speaking life into others. Listen, don't beat yourself up over all the mistakes you made. Again, yesterday ended last night. I can't do anything about the past, but I can start making better decisions for the future. I can start having better habits. I can be intentional, about speaking words of affirmation to my spouse and to my kids. And if you do that, you can watch God use your family to impact others for generations to come. I want to challenge you today. Choose one of these phrases that I just went over on this list that you heard on today's podcast that you've never said to your wife, or maybe you've never said to your kids, and I want you to say it this week. If you have trouble doing this in person, start with a text. Even start with, maybe just a note. But start and watch the impact it makes. We'll see you next time on the Man Up Podcast. Hey, Terry Gwaltney here from the Man Up Podcast. Listen, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you supporting the podcast, listening to it. We hope it's adding a ton of value to your life. Also want to ask you to do us a favor. If you could like and share this podcast on wherever you consume your social media content, whether that be YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, we would appreciate it. It just helps us get the word out so we can help more people. And maybe you've never experienced the Man Up Adventure Camp that we do in October. You can check out our Facebook or our website, manup-camp.com. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the Man Up Podcast, and we'll see you soon.